Hey friends, I'm Angelica. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Today I'm walking you through my must-have tools while I'm paper crafting. I just did a video where I did a tour through my new workspace, and one of the things that we went through were my drawers. I showed you my most used tools and what drawers I keep them in, but I didn't talk about them. So today I want to go more into depth why I use these tools, why they're important to me, and how often I use them. The first tool that we are going to look at is a zero center ruler. Now, the one that I am always using on screen is the Tim Holtz Ideology Zero Center Ruler. This is a 12-inch ruler, and there are quarter marks and 1/8 inch marks on the top of this ruler. I mainly use the bottom of this ruler, and this is where the zero center comes into play. If you're not familiar with what a zero center ruler is, there is a zero in the center of the ruler, and then on each side of the ruler, or each side of the zero, it measures out evenly. So you have your two 1-inch lines, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, all the way to the 6-inch is on each side, which is the end of the ruler. Now, why do I use this so often? I like to make sure that I'm putting my sentiments or an embellishment, maybe a die cut, in the center of my panel. Or I use it if I am doing frames. If I'm die cutting my own frames, let's say I'm using 2 rectangle dies to die cut a rectangle frame, I use this ruler to make sure that I have an even space around all 4 edges before I die cut the frame. So this is a tool that I have with me most of the projects that I'm doing. Now, another zero center ruler that I use is the magnetic ruler that comes with the Make ArtStation. Now, I don't use this too often on screen, but this is a tool that I use quite often. I bought my first one probably 8 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it came out. I bought it with the first release, and I loved it. In fact, let me grab that one. This is my first one, and like I said, all of the lines have been brushed off, and you can see I was mainly working with 6x6 stencils. So you just put your panel down on the Make ArtStation. They come with magnets, and that's going to hold your panel into place. And then the zero center ruler is also a magnet. So when I'm using the zero center ruler with this, it's more to make sure I'm putting letters on my panel straight and centered. So if I die cut a word out with an alphabet die set, I would quickly place it on my panel, figure out the center, what the middle letter is going to be, and then I build out from there just to make sure that my letters are perfectly spaced out and straight. I don't show a lot of love for this on camera because in my workspace the light reflected really bad off of the metal. But we're gonna see if I can use it more in this room because this is a tool that I do recommend. I do use it quite often. Like I said, this is my second one. My second tool, super easy. It's a brush. I bought this in the open art brushes at Joann's years ago, and I use this just to brush my panels, especially if I am coloring with colored pencils. A lot of the pigment will come off of the pencil, and instead of just brushing it off with my hand and maybe smearing some pigment on my paper that I'm coloring, I use the brush to keep my paper clean. I also use this before I take pictures of my cards. I just do a gentle brush to get any lint, any marks off of the card that I don't want on it before I take my pictures. So very easy and inexpensive tool. I do keep it in my basket right here on my desk so I can pull it out whenever I need it. And like I said, it's inexpensive. I probably paid between $3 to $5 for this. The next tool is a craft pick. So this is scrapbook.com's craft pick. I really like this one because there's 4 options with this one pin or one pick. So the ends come out, and then you can put This aside, I usually don't use this because it just makes these really long, and I like how small they are when they're out of the container. So this is the side that I use the most. It does have a wax end, and I use this when I'm putting on very small die cuts onto my project, especially like eyes or nose for an animal, or just the littlest die cuts. This is how I pick up my pieces. I usually put a drop of glue onto whatever I'm putting it on, and the glue is going to just grab it off of the wax tip. On the other end, it's shaped almost like a scraper, and that's how I get the die cut, the little die cut into position, is with this side. Now on the other side of this craft pick is there's a paper piercer, which I also use quite often, especially when I have intricate dies and I need help getting the die cut out of the die. I will use this to poke the paper out this side. There is another poker on the other side. I'm not sure what this side is used for. I've never used this, but I use the rest so much, I'm not worried about that fourth side that I don't use. Okay, so that is the next tool. Now we're going to talk about scissors. I have a nice variety of scissors, but I have two pairs that are my go-tos. I have my Tim Holtz mini snips, and then my Tim Holtz tonic. I don't even know what size they are, but they're just a large pair of scissors and really satisfying to use. So if I need to cut an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper quickly, I will just pull these out instead of using my paper trimmer. And that's mainly what I use these large scissors for. And I actually use them way more than what I was expecting to use them when I spent the $20 or $30 that these cost. And I bought them many years ago, so I don't even remember what they're called. I don't remember where I bought them. I just love how big they are. These scissors are what I use the most, and these came out maybe 6 months ago. And before these scissors, I would use the yellow, like the black and yellow. I can't remember what they're called. I don't even have them anymore. I ended up just tossing them once I got these scissors, but they were detail scissors, little thin detail scissors. You can just do a lot of fussy cutting with those scissors. But I also used them to cut foam adhesive, and they would just get so sticky from the adhesive from the foam. So I was sent the large and the small pair of scissors from this Tim Holtz tonic release. I don't really use the large one, and that's because I just have my just ride or die red pair. This one also is a spring action. These both are spring action. So there is a little lock, and once you unlock it, then they just open up on their own. So if you do have, if you do need help, if you have problems with your wrist, this would be a fantastic choice for you. If you already have a large pair like these, I don't think these are necessary. I did not buy these. They were sent to me, but I'm not going to pass them on. I will hold on to these just in case these ever, if I ever have to put these away. So the Tim Holtz mini snips, these are what I use the most. I always have these on camera with me. I do use them also a lot on foam adhesive. So usually when I'm cutting foam adhesive with scissors, the adhesive does get really thick and sticky on the scissors, and I have to use rubbing alcohol wipes to get that adhesive off. I have yet to have to wipe any adhesive buildup on these scissors. They're just fantastic. And that spring does really help when you're doing fussy cutting. I'm not a big fan of fussy cutting, but these scissors make it so easy. So huge fan of these, highly recommend. And if you can get your hand on a pair like these, I do recommend them also. I will look to see if I can find a link, but if I can't, Like I said, I bought these 7 or 8 years ago. And then also these scissors that I just showed, these are a fantastic option too. They do have the spring. Let's move on to the next tool, and I pulled out this box because it came out of this box. I don't remember how much this was. This is the Misty Creative Corners, and there is a whole bunch of rulers in here, some with magnets, and that way you can stamp in your Misty away from the edge and make sure that your paper is going to stay straight. So this is what the container looks like when you get it. I have never used these triangle rulers or the magnet triangles that are right here. I only use the L-shaped ruler. This is the first ruler that I came out of this package, and this has been sitting in my IKEA unit ever since. Again, I don't use these at all, but I don't think I could craft without this. And the reason why is because this helps me get those little sentiment strips straight. So I will put the stamp on my panel in my Misty, use the side as the guide, and just kind of pick up that sentiment. And usually the small sentiment strips are flat, or they don't have a lot of curves on them, so you can grab the bottom of that sentiment and then push it up into place, and it should be straight. Most of the time it is straight. Before I pick up the stamp with my Misty door, I do look down and make sure that the sentiment looks like it's going to sit straight on the grid lines on the Misty door. Again, this is another one that I keep, another tool that I keep in my basket right here so I can pull it out. Now I want to talk about sponge daubers. I have 240 sponge dauber packs right here, plus the container. I did buy these off of scrapbook.com. I use sponge daubers for my Distress Oxide inks, and that's only what I use these sponge daubers on. I don't touch my Distress Oxide ink pads with the sponge dauber and then pull out a dye ink pad and use that same sponge dauber, even though it might, be very similar in color, because I don't want this Distress Oxide pigment ink to touch my dye ink. So anything that I'm doing with Distress Oxide inks, my blending brushes, the sponge daubers, they are only for the Distress Oxide ink pads. Now, it's easy for me because that's really the only inks that I use. Rarely these days do I use dye inks on my projects. I love Distress Oxide inks so much. I just love the chalky finish that the oxides leave behind. I love what they do when you activate the inks with water. I love how they sit on the paper because they're pigments. They're a pigment ink, so they sit on top of the paper, and when you stamp with them, especially when you're stamping with sponge daubers, you get to keep all of those beautiful small details that are in some stamps that you lose when you're using a dye ink, because the dye ink can sometimes spread out and it just takes away any sort of delicate images that are in the stamp. So huge fan of Distress Oxide inks. Do you need the whole rainbow? Yes, you do. I will always recommend oxides to everybody. They're so fabulous, and I keep them on my desk with me and use them on most projects. Why do I use them on most projects? Because I'm lazy and because I don't like to snip my dies apart. So when you get a die, let me find a die so I can explain why. I pulled out 2 dies. I have 2 Greetery Botanica dies, and you can see I have not snipped these die sets apart. And the reason why is because it's just so much easier for me to take this and run it through my die cut machine with one panel of white paper. Then I can color my papers, the die cuts, with my sponge daubers and Distress Oxide inks. I do this with most of my die cuts, even though I have a huge selection of colored cardstock. The colored cardstock does have a place for me with my die cuts, and I do have certain companies that I only die cut with colored cardstock, but my favorite way to do my die cutting is with white paper and using the sponge daubers to ink the die cuts. Since we were just talking about Distress Oxide inks, I want to also talk about VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. This is the most used ink pad in my full ink collection. I stamp 90% of my sentiments with this ink. I'm always raving about this ink in my videos. It's so highly recommended. Next to my scissors, like these are an absolute yes. This is an absolute yes. Now, I mentioned it is a pigment ink, and pigment ink just sits beautifully on top of your paper. It doesn't sink into the fibers like a dye ink does, and sometimes that dye ink does spread out, and it makes your image just look a little muddy, maybe a little blurry. This is going to give you a crisp image, stamped image every time. There is a variety of colors. I mainly used black. I do have a few more colors in my drawer, but I really only use the green and red at Christmas. And then the other colors, I don't even think I've ever stamped with them. Now this is waterproof, so you can stamp your images onto watercolor paper and watercolor your image. This is really good on textured watercolor paper. You're not going to have to stamp over and over again. It just sits really nicely, even on the most textured paper like Arches cold press paper. You cannot use this with alcohol inks because, again, it is a pigment ink. It's going to contaminate your nib if your alcohol ink touches it, and it's also going to smear. So if you are coloring with alcohol markers, you definitely want to make sure you're using a dye ink or a hybrid ink. This is also good with colored pencils, but the pigment is going to blur out that black line a little bit, so just keep that in mind. But this is a yes. I highly recommend this ink. When I'm stamping, what I use to clean my stamps are chamois. So I usually buy a large car chamois and cut it down to 4 panels, and I keep them damp and stored in my daughter's old little snack cup she would carry around when she was a toddler. So it doesn't dry out because it has a little bit of a closure, and it's just easy access to get it in and out. When I'm done stamping, when I'm done crafting for a couple days, I do just keep it out of this jar so it doesn't get stinky, and I will put this out so it'll air dry. Reverse tweezers. This is another tool that you see in videos with me. Now, reverse tweezers are closed, and then when you pinch them, they open. So this tool is, I'm going to say this is probably my most used tool in my craft room. And I have probably 8 tweezers throughout my room in different areas. I like to hold my die cuts together when they need to glue together and I need to like put a little pressure. I will use my reverse tweezers to do that. I use these to take backing off of my adhesive, or just to kind of move stuff around. I will always have my panel or something in my tweezers. I like to call them my third hand, and it took me probably a week to get used to them and really understand how they worked. And then after that, I just could not craft without these. I couldn't imagine crafting without these. It's like sitting down at my desk. The first thing I have to do is put on my glasses. The second thing I do is pull out my tweezers. Waffle Flower Crafts grip mats are another must-have for me in my craft room. I have several sizes. This is the 6x6 size that I use stenciling, or I think it's 6x6. Yeah, 6x6. And you can see mine is very well loved. It does get stained from inks. I don't care if my craft supplies get stained because I use them. I don't keep them around so they stay pretty. I like to use them. So they will stain. Depending on what ink you're using, it does stain. This is another great tool to have when you're inking your die cuts, when you want to use your dye inks or Distress Oxide inks to color your die cuts. So you would put your die cut on this grip mat and it just holds it in place while you're adding your ink. I have several sizes. I even have one in my MISTI, and this is a large one. I have yet to open this up. And when I was talking about my grip mat in the video of my craft room tour, this one's the 7.5 by 11. This is huge. This acetate, I did not want to pull it off and struggle like how I had to with this acetate. But I had a viewer let me know that these storage pockets, this one's from scrapbook.com, is a fantastic way to store the grip mats in. So I'm really excited about that because now I know I don't have to fight with the acetate on this large grip mat, which I have been holding on to. Waffle Flower Crafts did send me this a few months ago, and when I got it, I was on vacation, and then I just have not had time to use it because we did the renovation. So I am excited to open this size up. Like I said, I have the 6x6, I have a 4x4, I have the one in my MISTI. So this is gonna be a bigger size, so my daughter and I both can be crafting on it at the same time. I think that's how I'm gonna be using this. I just mentioned that I have a grip mat in my MISTI, and this is the MISTI that has the grip mat in it. If you don't know what a MISTI is, it is a stamping platform. You just put your panel in your inside the MISTI. You put the stamp on top of your panel wherever you want to stamp the image, and then you pick up the stamp with the MISTI door. As you can see, I have a stamp already in my MISTI. I'm in the middle of a big project, so I'm keeping this in here because I'm still stamping panels. But this one does have a grip mat in it, and it's the full length, so it does have a tackiness to it, so my panel is not going to move, it's not going to shift, and it just makes sure that I can get a really good image every time I stamp, especially if I need to stamp twice, if I didn't get a good impression the first time. And then this mat, the grip mat in here, I can also use if I want to stencil something. If I don't want to pull out my 6x6, I can also just use the grip mat in here. I just put my stencil right inside the MISTI. When I am die cutting, I like to use trays to keep my die cuts separated. I have these bigger trays from scrapbook.com, and they do stack, so this is really good for storage. I have smaller trays. These I got at the dollar store, and I have a couple packages of these. These are great for the smaller die cuts, and they don't take up a lot of room when you have to have them spread out for all your die cut pieces. I also have a sanding block. I talked more about this in my tour video, but I just like to sand the edges of my die cuts. Sometimes the edges aren't clean. They'll just have some fibers hanging off the edge. So this is just a great way to quickly get those fibers off. I have a visitor. My dogs are in and out of the house right now. In fact, my window covering doesn't come for like another 5 weeks, so I'm sure that they've peeked their head through a couple times. Okay, so on my desk also, I usually will pull out a small die cut machine. This one is the Spellbinders scrapbook.com machine. This one is actually really great because you have a lot of cutting room. Here are the cutting plates. Hey, baby. Here are the cutting plates. So it's almost a slimline. I mean, it's narrow, but it's just really long. So you can get a lot of die cuts on this cutting board. Now, my other small die cut machine I have is a Sizzix Sidekick, but those cutting boards are about this big. So I can get a lot more done when I have this machine out on my desk. I don't keep my big die cut machines on my desk. I have a different area for die cutting. So that's why I like to use this one on my desk, because I can just stay, or even on the island, I can just stay put. I don't have to go somewhere else to die cut. The last thing that I want to talk about is adhesive. Now, I have my basket of adhesive out, and I have my favorite adhesives in here, my backups. So I use scrapbook.com's adhesive rolls to add all of my panels to my card bases, and anything that's big that needs to be attached, I will use double-sided adhesive. My glues I keep in little bottles, so I have more control when I'm putting glue on my die cuts, because that's mainly what I'm die cutting or gluing is die cuts. And I have the needle point, so it helps me control where I'm putting the glue and how much glue I'm putting down. And inside this bottle, I do have Art Glitter Glue. This is my favorite glue. I have used it for years. I'm not going anywhere. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It's fantastic. It dries really quickly. It's really thin. It's easy to use. It doesn't stink. It dries clear. It dries kind of matte. If you make a big mess, yeah, you're gonna see it when it dries. But if it's just a little bit that comes out from under your die cut, it's going to just blend in. I really recommend this glue. My girlfriend sent me the Bearly Art Precision Glue last year for Christmas, and I did compare these. I didn't do it in a video. I just did it on a project just to see, because I see a lot of crafters using this glue, and I never bought it because it's really expensive. So, and my Art Glitter Glue works just fine. But Miriam sent this to me, and I'm glad that she did. And I'm happy to say that they're pretty much the same. Same consistency. This one's a little bit more white when you're putting it down, but it doesn't have a smell to it. Had I not been introduced to Art Glitter Glue, this definitely would be my glue of choice. Art Glitter Glue is a little cheaper than this, but this is a lot more easy to find, to buy. Now, these two glues do dry really quickly. So when I need a glue to not dry quickly, if I am putting glue on a really large project, I will use scrapbook.com's Artise glue. This takes longer to dry. It is a lot thicker though than the Bearly Art Glue and the Art Glitter Glue. But I do have this when I have bigger projects I need to glue. I also have a huge variety of adhesive, foam adhesive in here. I have strips, squares, circles, and different sizes. So I'm gonna pull out these circles. These are large. I don't know what the size of these are. I think these are 2 millimeter, but I have 1, 2, and 3 millimeter from scrapbook.com in a variety of different ways. Let's see, here's little small squares. And then what I use the most are the strips and the foam rolls. And I mainly use 1 millimeter size. And this size just was made available at scrapbook.com. I don't know, probably at the beginning of this past year. I think around January, February 2024. But before that, I was using thin foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives, and I would buy these off of Amazon. Now, I haven't bought these in a while, and I can tell because I would normally have like this whole area just filled with the thin foam squares, because I would use them on every card that I made. They just have such, I just love the dimension. That's just the tiniest amount of dimension that the 1 millimeter gives. Now that I've shared all of my favorite tools that I like to use, I'm actually going to pack them in this new storage container. This was sent to me by scrapbook.com, and I was really excited when I got this because we were right in the middle of our basement renovation. I was feeling pretty blue, and I had been invited to a craft retreat here in the Pacific Northwest that I could not go to. And when this came, it just came at the perfect time because that invitation had just happened. And I thought, you know what? the next time I get invited and I say yes, I get to say yes, I'm actually going to pack my tools in this. This is going to be a great way for me to organize my tools, have them out so they're out in the open, but not like taking up tons of space, you know, with whoever I'm crafting with. So I thought it would be fun to just quickly get the tools that I was just talking about. I have a couple honorable mentions too that weren't mentioned. So let's fill this up. I'm going to open it. This is a really large container and there's two parts to it. So I'm going to take the top off and we're going to work with the bottom first. So I am going to pack this as if I am leaving, and I did pull out some product to fill this with. So the first thing I would put in here if I was going to the retreat is I pulled out some Concord and Ninth ink cubes, and I also pulled out some paper. So I really like these paper pads from scrapbook.com, the solids, because you have your nice little rainbow of colors. I don't have to go through my cardstock. I just pull this pad out, and they have different palettes too. This one's Vacation. I also pulled out a patterned paper 6x8 pad, and I have some stamps, some Christmas stamps and dies that I would take with me. I don't know if I would do my die cutting here or there, but I have dies, and then I have some stamp sets, a really cute Christmas sentiment stamp set. I would also pack some adhesive. So I have my double-sided adhesive roll, some foam adhesive, and then I have white panels and another small pattern paper pack. Scissors, my paintbrush, the L-shaped ruler for those small sentiment strips. I have my large scissors and my 0 center ruler. You know what? Let's stack this a little bit more over here because I also want to bring my little dish for my chamois. So I'm going to just organize that just a little bit different. Let's put the paper here, ruler, adhesive, my 0 center ruler. How about a grip mat? And I have a larger mint tape if I am going to do some die cutting. I do die cut a lot with the mint tape to hold my dies in place. Now let's put the top on, and we'll take the lid off of here. There are two compartments that come out, so I could put one on the table if I wanted to, or just fill this out and leave the compartments out. But I am going to keep these in. And I have my Versamark or VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I have my sanding block. I did grab a roller too. So I use rollers when I need to put down adhesive fast. So I do have a nice variety of rollers too. It's just more cost effective with the double-sided adhesive rolls. I have some acrylic blocks. And I did grab some little trays and my glue, some reverse tweezers, and a smaller pack of mint tape. And then I have a pick, my craft pick, I forgot to put in here. I also have some alcohol wipes. I use alcohol wipes when I get a lot of ink on my MISTI door, or as I was saying earlier, on my scissors if I have adhesive on the scissors. The last thing that I have to put in the container is my MISTIs. So that can fit right on top. I'm just going to stick that in here. Why don't I just take this off real quick? I'll just stick that ink right in there, and this is it. This is all that I would need to take with me, other than I think this is it. I do have a roller. I have a roller bag that I would use on a weekend trip, but that is up in the attic, and this is in my craft room. So I can see that it is able to hold a lot of stuff. So I'm really happy about that. Plus I have 2 workspaces too. So this is going to help me not have to go back and forth. I can just put my most used tools here on the island and get to work. that is going to finish this video. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. I know I talk a lot when it comes to crafting, when it comes to tools, but this is what I do. I craft almost every day, and I'm really much in love with the tools and the products that I touch on a daily basis, and I just love sharing the information and the reasons why I like these products with you. So I had a lot of fun putting this video together. I hope you had fun. Be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and I'm going to be back shortly with another video. So I'll see you then. Take care, friends.